Rise of the Shadow Monarch. What if death was just the beginning? Sung Jin-Woo died. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, he literally flatlined in that godforsaken dungeon, his heart stopping as monster claws tore through his chest. But here is where everything you think you know about death gets turned upside down. He woke up. And when he opened his eyes, floating before him was a message that would change not just his life, but the entire world. The system has chosen you, the hook that started everything. Most people think solo leveling is just another power fantasy anime. They're wrong. It is a story about what happens when the universe itself decides you are worth a second chance, but at a price that might cost you your humanity. Jin-Woo wasn't special. In a world where magical gates spawn deadly dungeons and hunters risk their lives for glory and money, he was the weakest of the weak. E rank, the bottom of the barrel. His fellow hunters called him names behind his back, and honestly, they weren't wrong. While S-rank hunters could level entire city blocks with their abilities, Jin-Woo struggled to take down a simple goblin. But death has a funny way of putting things in perspective. The moment everything changed, picture this. You're trapped in a dungeon that's already claimed half your team. Stone statues tower above you, each one holding instruments of death. Your strongest hunter is paralyzed with fear. The air itself seems to whisper promises of doom. And then you realize this isn't just any dungeon. This is a double dungeon, a nightmare within a nightmare that wasn't supposed to exist. The rules were simple and terrifying. Worship the god, prove your faith, or die. Jin-Woo made a choice that day. Not the smart choice, not the safe choice, but the human choice. He stayed behind. He faced the stone god knowing he would die. And die he did. But what happens when death itself becomes your teacher? The system's true nature. When Jin-Woo awakened, he wasn't just given power, he was given something far more dangerous, unlimited potential. The system didn't just make him stronger, it made him into something that had never existed before. A player in a world of NPCs. Every monster he killed made him stronger. Every quest completed unlocked new abilities. Every level gain brought him closer to a truth that would shake the foundations of reality itself. But here is what the system did and tell him initially, and this is where the story gets truly terrifying. He wasn't just becoming stronger. He was becoming something else entirely. The first taste of real power. Remember that construction site dungeon? The one where Jin-Woo first realized his E-rank days were over? Picture him standing over the corpse of a beast that should have killed him, his hand glowing with shadowy energy he didn't understand. The other hunters stared at him like he was a ghost. Maybe he was. That's when the whispers started. Not from other people, from the shadows themselves. Master, we await your command. The point of no return. Every great story has a moment where the protagonist crosses a line they can never uncross. For Jin-Woo, it wasn't when he got his powers. It wasn't even when he started winning fights he should have lost. It was when he looked into the eyes of his first shadow soldier, a being he had killed and then raised from death itself, and felt not horror, but satisfaction. That's when you realize solo leveling isn't just about getting stronger. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice for power. And Jin-Woo, he was willing to sacrifice everything, even if he didn't realize it yet. The Jeju Island incident. By the time the world's strongest hunters gathered for the Jeju Island raid, Jin-Woo had already surpassed most S ranks in raw power. But power without purpose is just destruction waiting to happen. As he stood on that beach, watching seasoned hunters prepare for what they thought would be their greatest challenge, Jin-Woo knew something they didn't. The real enemy wasn't on the island. It was standing right behind him, wearing his face. But some truths are too dangerous to speak aloud. The Shadow Army awakens. What would you do if you could raise an army from your enemies' corpses? If every monster you defeated could become your eternal servant? Jin-Woo didn't just collect shadows, he collected loyalty that transcended death itself. Igris, the blood-red commander. Beru, the Ant King. Iron, the white ghost. Each name carried weight. Each shadow held memories of battles that shook the earth. And at their head stood Jin-Woo, no longer the weakest hunter, no longer even human in any way that mattered. He had become the Shadow Monarch. The truth about the gates. Here's where everything you thought you knew gets shattered. The gates weren't random. The monsters weren't just mindless beasts. The entire hunter system, the rankings, the associations, all of it was part of a war that had been raging since before humanity took its first breath. And Jin-Woo, he wasn't just a player in this war. He was the war. The final revelation. The system had one last secret, one final truth that would make Jin-Woo question everything he had become. When he finally stood face to face with the architect, the being who had orchestrated his resurrection, the words that echoed through that impossible space would haunt him forever. You were never the chosen one, sung Jin-Woo. You were the backup plan. What comes after power? In the end, solo leveling asks a question that most power fantasies are too afraid to explore. What happens when you get everything you ever wanted and realize it was never what you needed? When Jin-Woo stands at the peak of power, commanding legions that could reshape reality itself, he faces a choice that no amount of strength can solve. Save the world, or save his humanity. He can't have both. And his decision will determine not just his fate, but the fate of every shadow that ever answered his call. The rise of the Shadow Monarch wasn't just about one man's journey from weakness to godlike power. It was about the price of transcendence, the weight of absolute authority, and the question that haunts every hero who climbs to height when you can control death itself. What's left to live for? The story continues.